My ex-wife's new husband mocked me in front of his friends for not having a job. They didn't know I owned the company they all worked for until I fired them. They say life has a funny way of bringing things full circle, but this wasn't funny. Not to me, anyway. To them, though? Oh, it was hilarious. I sat on the leather couch in Tom's pristine modern house, nursing a glass of water, pretending to be unbothered by the snide remarks and laughter swirling around me. Tom, Sophia's new husband, was in his element, surrounded by his hand-picked circle of elitists, all basking in their self-importance. And then there was me, the uninvited guest, the pity case, the ex-husband still struggling to get his life together. At least that's what they thought. Sophia had invited me, though not out of kindness, no. She wanted one last moment of satisfaction, a final nail in the coffin of our past. Tom wanted to mark his territory, make it clear that he had won, that he had replaced me with a better, wealthier version of myself. So I played along. I let them seat me in the most awkward corner of the room, let them pretend like I didn't belong here. I let them mock me, pick at my supposed failures, laugh about how I never amounted to much. What they didn't know, I owned them. Not in the way they own their fancy sports cars or their designer watches. No. I own them in the way a spider owns a fly trapped in its web, patiently, quietly, and completely, but they had no clue. I had barely taken a sip of my drink before Tom took center stage, shifting the conversation to me. A smirk creeping across his smug, perfect face. Daniel, tell us, what is it you do these days? His voice was dripping with false curiosity. Like I was a charity case, he felt obligated to entertain. Sophia laughed first, the same laugh I had heard 1,000 times before. He's still figuring it out, she said, swirling her wine like she was some kind of goddess granting me mercy. The room erupted in chuckles. Greg, one of Tom's business partners, leaned forward, barely masking his amusement. Still unemployed? He grinned. Man, that's rough. I don't know how you manage. I'd go crazy if I didn't have a reason to get up in the morning. More laughter. Angela, his wife, snorted into her drink. Sophia, you're too nice. If it were me, I'd be embarrassed to have an ex still loitering around without a job. I forced a weak smile, nodding like I was part of the joke. Like I wasn't silently memorizing every word. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, the itch in my fingers to end this game right now, to watch their faces morph from mockery to sheer horror, but not yet. Tom leaned back, basking in his own superiority, his arms slung lazily over the back of the couch as he sighed dramatically. You know, he said, his voice carrying that obnoxious brand of confidence only the truly ignorant possess. I keep telling Sophia she really dodged a bullet. The room erupted in cruel laughter again. I clenched my jaw, my grip tightening around the glass in my hand, but I kept my face carefully blank. Tom wasn't done. I mean, no offense, Daniel, he continued, smirking like he was doing me a favor, but it must be hard knowing she upgraded. Must be tough watching her move on with someone who can actually take care of her. Sophia smirked, sipping her wine. She didn't even look at me. Greg chuckled. Damn, Tom, that's cold. Angela nudged Sophia playfully. How do you do it? I would have blocked my ex a long time ago. Oh, he's harmless, Sophia said, pretending to be generous, like she was too good to be bitter. It's just sad, really. I mean, he tried his best, but some men just don't have what it takes to make it. I let the words sink in. I let them laugh. I let Tom look at me like a king looking down at a peasant. Let Sophia bask in the attention. Let their friends enjoy the show. But inside, I was smiling. What they didn't know, because Tom's successful company, it was mine. Because Greg's position, I gave it to him. Because Angela's promotions, I signed off on them. Because the house they were all sitting in, the luxury, the comfort, the privilege, it existed because I allowed it to exist. They thought they were laughing at a nobody, at a man who had failed. They had no idea they were laughing at their boss. The final blow. Tom raised his glass, grinning like he had just delivered a punchline worthy of a standing ovation to Sophia for finally getting the man she deserves, he toasted. Sophia beamed. The room clinked their glasses together, their smiles wide, their delusion intact. I lifted my own glass slightly, nodding. The perfect image of the defeated ex-husband, the laughingstock of the night. But inside? Inside, I was counting down the hours. Less than 12 hours until they walked into my office, thinking it was just another day at work. Less than 12 hours until their world came crashing down. Let them laugh tonight because tomorrow they won't have anything left to laugh about. I didn't need to be a mind reader to know exactly what they thought of me. To them, I was the failure. The washed-up ex-husband who couldn't keep a job, the man Sophia had the good sense to leave behind. In their minds, Tom was my superior in every possible way. The man who provided for her, the man with the business acumen and financial power I supposedly lacked, and their little circle of elitists, they saw me as an outsider, a joke, someone to be pitted and condescended to. They had no idea that they were standing on a chessboard I had been setting up for years. Every single job title, every office promotion, every so-called power move they thought they had earned had been signed off by me. Their entire world was a carefully crafted illusion, and I was its architect. It hadn't always been like this. Years ago, I was just another ambitious entrepreneur trying to make something out of nothing. My father had been cheated out of his own business, a small electronics repair shop, when a group of corporate raiders bought him out for pennies and shut him down overnight. I watched him lose everything, and I swore that no one would ever do that to me. So I taught myself everything: finance, business law, software development, strategy. I spent years working behind the scenes, gaining power without revealing my hand. By the time I turned 28, I had launched Summit Innovations, a company that started with small software solutions but quickly grew into a tech powerhouse. By 30, I was quietly acquiring smaller companies. By 35, I had built a global empire. But the key to real power isn't just wealth or influence. It's patience. It's letting people think they're winning while you pull the strings from the shadows. And that's exactly what I did. Sophia never knew. When we met, I was already wealthy, but I never let her see it. I drove an old car, dressed in modest clothes, and let her believe that I was still trying to find my place in the world. She encouraged me at first, telling me I would figure things out. But the moment she realized I wasn't climbing the corporate ladder the way she wanted, the cracks began to show. Sophia didn't want a partner. She wanted a man she could mold into her idea of success. When she didn't get that, her support turned into ridicule. She started belittling me in private, making comments about my lack of ambition. Then it escalated. She began doing it in front of friends, using me as a punchline at dinner parties. By the time she left me, she had convinced herself that she was the one who had built our life, that she had moved on to a man worthy of her status. Tom, the so-called business mogul. The man who didn't even realize that his entire company operated under mine. I hadn't just built an empire. I had constructed an entire ecosystem. One where I could monitor the people closest to me without them ever knowing. When Sophia left me for Tom, I didn't just sit back and accept it. I started buying out the businesses that Tom depended on. I acquired the firms that provided his company with software. I secured silent controlling interest in the banks that financed his real estate ventures. Bit by bit, without him ever realizing it, I made sure that Summit Innovations had the power to control his company's fate. And Tom's friends? The same people who laughed at me last night, they all worked for me. Melissa, who mocked me the loudest at the party. She was the head of marketing at Summit Innovations, a position she got because I allowed it. Angela, who joked about how embarrassing it would be to have a husband like me. She ran HR for the company, but I had the emails proving she covered up harassment complaints. Greg and Scott, who clinked their glasses in agreement when Tom toasted to Sophia's upgrade. They were executives at Tom's company, which meant their careers depended on my decisions. And now, they were hours away from learning the truth. By 9 a.m., they would walk into their offices completely unaware that their fates had already been sealed. Melissa would find herself locked out of her corporate email, blindsided by a financial audit that would expose her fraudulent expense reports. Angela would receive a notice of termination, citing her mismanagement and ethical violations. Greg and Scott would be called into a meeting where they would face the consequences of their falsified sales figures and insider dealings. And Tom? He would get a call from his board of directors informing him that his financial backing had been pulled. By the end of the day, his company would be on the verge of collapse. And Sophia? Well, Sophia would be in for the biggest shock of them all. I sat at my desk, the dim glow of my computer screen illuminating the files I had compiled over the years. Financial reports, surveillance footage, emails filled with incriminating evidence. I had been patient. I had played the long game. And now, I was ready to set it all in motion. I glanced at the clock. 4 a.m. 5 hours until their world burned. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about justice. About reclaiming the life that had been stolen from me, piece by piece, through arrogance and deceit. They thought they had one. They thought they were untouchable. They thought I was beneath them. Tomorrow, they'd finally see the truth. I wasn't just their equal. I was their boss and I was done playing nice. There's a unique kind of satisfaction in watching someone walk confidently toward their own downfall, unaware that every step they take is leading them closer to the edge of a cliff. That's exactly what was happening. I sat in the back of a black town car, sipping my coffee as we pulled up to Summit Innovations headquarters. My company, my empire, the kingdom that none of them knew I ruled. I could already see them arriving, completely oblivious. Melissa, the loudest of the bunch, stepped out of her sleek luxury sedan, her heels clicking against the pavement as she strutted toward the glass doors. She adjusted her designer coat, balancing her phone between her ear and shoulder, probably barking orders at her team. Greg and Scott arrived together, laughing as they exited their car, looking relaxed, probably discussing golf or some new scheme to boost their quarterly numbers without actually doing any real work. Angela followed, walking with purpose, flipping through a folder, probably preparing for some HR meeting where she pretended to care about employee concerns while covering up another scandal. And then there was Tom, Sophia's perfect husband. The man who had openly mocked me just hours ago, stepped out of his black Mercedes like he owned the world. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, adjusted his tailored suit, and exchanged a few self-important words with Greg and Scott before heading inside. They thought it was just another Monday morning at work. They had no idea what was waiting for them. I checked my watch. 8:45 a.m. 15 minutes. I took another slow sip of my coffee. Instead of walking through the grand front entrance like they did every morning, I took a different route, the private entrance I had built into the building's design years ago. Security nodded at me as I stepped in. My assistant, Sarah, was already waiting for me in the control room where monitors displayed live feeds from across the building. She glanced up from her tablet and smirked, right on schedule. I nodded, setting my coffee down. Everything in place? She handed me a folder of finalized documents, termination notices, audit reports, security logs. Melissa is on the 10th floor in a budget review meeting, she said. Angela is prepping for a disciplinary hearing. Ironic, isn't it? Greg and Scott are in their usual Monday morning check-in, and Tom is in his office working on some last-minute deal. I smirked. Not for long. Sarah tapped her screen. IT has locked them out of their accounts. The moment you walk in, they'll be completely cut off. I took a deep breath, straightened my tie, and checked my watch again. 8:59 a.m. Time to put an end to the charade. I stepped into the elevator, pressing the button for the executive floor. As I reached the top, I could already hear the first signs of panic. Melissa was standing in front of her assistant's desk, her voice sharp and irritated. What do you mean I'm locked out of my email? Reset the damn password. The assistant stammered, looking nervous. I can't, ma'am. IT says your credentials have been revoked. Melissa's face twisted in frustration. Revoked? By who? I run this damn department. I strode past her, heading toward the conference room. She barely noticed me, too wrapped up in her own unraveling reality. Angela stormed out of the HR office, her face flushed. Who authorized a company-wide audit without notifying me first? She snapped at a lower-level HR rep. Greg and Scott were standing near the glass windows, whispering nervously as they checked their phones. Their accounts were probably frozen, and their creative accounting tricks had been exposed. And Tom? Tom was in his office, pacing in front of his desk. His jaw clenched as he listened to someone shouting through the phone. I already knew what he was hearing. His investors were pulling out. His deals were collapsing. His entire business, built on a foundation of arrogance and borrowed power, was crumbling beneath him. And he still didn't know why. Not yet. I walked slowly, taking my time, enjoying the weight of the moment. Every panicked voice, every confused whisper, every executive who had spent years looking down on me, mocking me, thinking they were untouchable, now scrambling, realizing that their security was an illusion. My illusion. Sarah met me near the boardroom door. They're inside, she said quietly, handing me a tablet with a real-time feed of the room. Tom was at the head of the table, frustrated, gripping the edge of the desk as he spoke. Melissa was frantically flipping through documents, probably trying to find some legal loophole to save herself. Angela looked shaken, her usual confidence gone. Greg and Scott were whispering urgently, glancing toward the door. They could feel it. They didn't know what was happening, but they knew something was very, very wrong. I checked my watch. 9 a.m. sharp. Time to go. Sarah gave me a nod. It's all yours. I pushed the doors open and stepped inside. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me. Tom frowned. Daniel, what the hell are you doing here? Melissa's face twisted in irritation. This is a private meeting. Angela scoffed. You're not even supposed to be on this floor. I didn't sit down. I didn't rush. I walked to the head of the table, my seat, and took my time before speaking. And then with perfect calmness, I looked them all in the eyes and said, I'm Daniel Carter, CEO of Summit Innovations. I let the words hang in the air, watching as realization slowly sank in. Tom's jaw tightened. Melissa's confidence shattered. Angela blinked in disbelief. Greg and Scott paled. I leaned forward slightly, my voice calm, deliberate, deadly. And as of this morning, you're all fired. The moment the game changed, silence. Not the awkward silence of an uncomfortable moment. Not the confused silence of people unsure what to say. No, this was something else entirely. This was the silence of people realizing for the first time that they were no longer in control. That they had never been. That everything, their careers, Their reputations, their power had always belonged to someone else. To me, I smiled just a little. Let the fun begin. You never really understand power until you watch people realize they have none. The moment I said those words, the room turned into a freeze frame of shock. Tom, the man who had mocked me the night before, the man who thought he had replaced me, the man who believed he was superior in every way, stared at me like he had just seen a ghost. Melissa blinked rapidly, her mouth opening and closing as if her brain was still trying to process what she had just heard. Angela's hand tightened around her pin, her face shifting from confusion to disbelief. Greg and Scott exchanged frantic glances, their carefully built personas cracking under the weight of reality. I let them sit in it. I let them marinate in the silence, their perfect little world crumbling in real time. Tom recovered first, or at least, he tried to. He let out a forced laugh, leaning back in his chair, trying to mask his growing panic with arrogance. "This is a joke, right?" he said, his voice carrying that same smugness he had used at the party, though now it wavered ever so slightly. "Sophia put you up to this?" I tilted my head slightly, watching him amused. "You tell me." I tapped my tablet and the large monitors on the walls lit up, and that's when everything truly fell apart, exposing the lies. The first screen showed Summit Innovations' official incorporation documents with my name in bold print. Daniel Carter, founder and CEO. Melissa's face drained of color as the next screen appeared. Expense reports. Dozens of fraudulent charges made under her name. Personal trips disguised as business meetings. Luxury shopping sprees covered under company retreats. Her hands gripped the edge of the table, her breath shaky. Angela's file came next. A log of harassment complaints she had buried. Emails where she had threatened employees who dared to speak up. Her lips parted in disbelief, but she had no words. Greg and Scott screens followed. Falsified quarterly reports. Performance bonuses they had inflated by manipulating sales numbers. Tom? His screen was the worst of them all. A series of financial transactions showing just how much his business was propped up by Summit Innovations resources. How every deal he had made was approved by me. How his entire career was nothing but a lie. I watched as the truth settled into them like poison. Melissa was the first to break the silence. This isn't real," she whispered. I tilted my head slightly, almost feeling sorry for her. Almost. "Do you want me to pull up the receipts?" I asked smoothly. "Because I have those too." Angela turned to Tom, panicked. "Tell me you knew about this," she hissed. But Tom, who had spent the last year bragging about how powerful he was, how he had built something Sophia could be proud of, looked like a man who had just realized his house was built on sand. His fingers clenched into fists on the table. "How the hell is this possible?" he demanded, his voice sharp with anger. This company isn't yours?" I finished for him. I leaned forward, resting my hands on the table. My voice calm, steady, unwavering. "No, Tom, it never was." The fall begins. Security entered the room right on cue, standing by the door. "You can't be serious," Greg muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. I simply smiled. "I am." And then with a final tap on my tablet, the termination notices appeared on the monitors, one by one. Signed, sealed, finalized. Melissa shot up from her chair. "You can't do this," she shrieked. Angela followed suit, her voice shaking. "This is wrongful termination," she spat. We have rights. We'll sue." I met her panicked gaze, my expression unreadable. "For what?" I asked. "For getting caught?" She paled. Greg and Scott sat frozen, realization settling into them like a death sentence. And Tom? Tom, the man who had mocked me so freely, the man who had sat in his mansion and ridiculed me in front of his friends. He simply stared because he knew he had lost. I straightened my suit, adjusting my cuffs, and looked each of them in the eye. "You spent years thinking you were untouchable," I said, "laughing at the people below you, taking what you didn't earn, thinking no one would ever stop you." I picked up my tablet again, tapped a few keys. "You were wrong." I turned to security, "Escort them out." The guards stepped forward. Angela tried to fight it, hissing threats under her breath. Melissa looked stunned, her entire world crashing down around her. Greg and Scott slumped in their seats, defeated. And Tom? Tom didn't move at first. He just stared at me, his hands gripping the table so tightly his knuckles went white. Then slowly, he stood. He fixed his tie, straightened his posture, and looked at me with pure venom in his eyes. "This isn't over," he said, voice cold. I simply smiled. "It is for you." The guards moved in, and just like that, the mighty had fallen. The aftermath. As the doors slammed shut behind them, silence settled over the boardroom. The empty chairs, the abandoned files, the remnants of a legacy built on arrogance and deception, gone in a matter of minutes. I exhaled slowly, rolling my shoulders back. Sarah walked in a few seconds later, her tablet in hand. "Well," she said, raising an eyebrow. That was satisfying. I smirked, grabbing my coffee. "They never saw it coming," she chuckled, flipping through her notes. "All executive accounts have been revoked. IT is scrubbing their emails now." I nodded. "Good. Make sure legal is prepared in case any of them try to retaliate." Sarah smirked. "With the evidence we have, they don't stand a chance." I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the moment sink in. For years, they had laughed at me, underestimated me, belittled me. Now they had nothing left. And Tom? Tom would go home to Sophia, and she would have to explain to him why she had left the man who actually built everything she had ever wanted. I checked my watch, 11 a.m., and the day was just getting started. You never truly see a person's character until they've lost everything. As security led Tom, Melissa, Angela, Greg, and Scott out of the boardroom, the entire floor fell eerily silent. Employees who once feared and obeyed them now watched in stunned disbelief, whispering amongst themselves as the so-called executives of Summit Innovations were being escorted like criminals. Tom, still trying to hold on to his pride, straightened his tie and walked as if he still had power, but his eyes, they betrayed him. Fury, panic, humiliation. Melissa, usually full of fake confidence, was muttering to herself, her face twisted in pure rage. Angela was on the verge of tears, still trying to convince the security team this was all a mistake. Greg and Scott looked like ghosts, completely defeated, as if the weight of reality had crushed them in minutes. I followed behind at a slow, deliberate pace, my expression unreadable. I wasn't just watching them leave. I was watching everything they had built on lies collapse around them. As they passed through the halls, I could see it. The way employees reacted. Some stood in shock, others in thinly veiled amusement, but most of them looked relieved. They knew they had endured the tyranny of these executives for years, the favoritism, the corruption, the blatant abuse of power. And now? Now, they were seeing justice unfold in real time. A woman from accounting, Emma, I think her name was, whispered to her co-worker, "I told you something was off with Melissa." One of the IT guys muttered under his breath, "Angela getting fired?" Finally, as we reached the main entrance, Tom suddenly stopped walking. He turned to face me, his hands clenched into fists. "You set this up," he growled, his voice low and furious. I raised an eyebrow. "You think Melissa spun around, pointing a manicured finger at me? This isn't over," she snapped. "You think you can just rip everything away from us?" I smirked, slipping my hands into my pockets. "Melissa, everything you had was mine to begin with. You just didn't know it," she huffed in disbelief, shaking her head. Angela let out a bitter laugh, her voice breaking. "You were sitting at those dinner parties the whole time, listening to us laugh at you, and you let it happen?" I shrugged. "Would you have believed me if I had told you the truth?" Silence. Because they all knew the answer. No. They had been too blinded by their own arrogance, too drunk on their illusion of power to ever consider the possibility